If you can beat an Elden Ring boss at level 1 with no weapon upgrades and no summons and without taking a hit, then I would consider you to be a master of that boss. There are more difficult challenge run rule sets than that, but if you can succeed with those restrictions, then you're within arm's reach of doing anything else you ever might want to do in a challenge run, just skill-wise. And the way to achieve that level of mastery is not a secret, it's just that you have to really focus on increasing two of the most important attributes a challenge run player needs, which is knowledge and muscle memory. And the natural way to build knowledge is just to pay really close attention to whatever happens in the fight, just so you can figure out the kind of moveset flowchart on your own. Just figure out how to most effectively react to any particular situation you might find yourself in. But it's really easy to speed up the process of raising that attribute just by watching moveset guides on YouTube that just tell you what to do in every situation, like how to respond to every attack. And there are also written guides for bosses, and there's just a lot of different resources you could use that could give you the knowledge that you need to figure out the mechanics of any particular fight. The point is just that you want to learn from other people that have already figured out those mechanics, just so that you don't have to figure them out yourself. You can just learn from a guide. But the other side of that mastery coin is muscle memory, and building muscle memory is kind of the hard part of practicing for challenge runs because there's way less opportunity to speed up the process. There's really not any shortcuts. Other people can't give you their muscle memory. You just have to build it yourself with hours of repetition. And what I mean by muscle memory is just being able to react to situations in the fight almost by instinct. Your hands just do the thing without your brain needing to put any effort into telling them what to do. I'm sure this is not a foreign concept to you. I'm sure you've built muscle memory in other parts of your life. Like if you make coffee every morning, I'm sure you do that without thinking. A lot of people drive without thinking too much about the process of driving. I'm sure you can basically brush your teeth while still asleep, for example. The concept of building muscle memory shouldn't necessarily be new to you, but you can also achieve that level of effortless action with Elden Ring boss fights.
And it just requires the exact same training method that every other thing that you've ever built muscle memory for requires, which is just repetition.
For example, I spent 25 hours practicing the Melania fight before I was able to beat her at level 1 with no weapon upgrades, and I was definitely using moveset guides to boost my knowledge acquisition.
That's just how long it took, 25 hours worth of repetitions, and some other bosses will take other amounts of time than that, but you understand the point I'm trying to make.
Some people might be able to do it faster than I did, but there's no way to cheat the process. You have to just spend time with repetition. Really, the best way to make the process of building muscle memory faster is to make yourself invincible using cheats, and also make the boss that you're fighting invincible, and then just spend a super long time just practicing dodges. That's the most efficient possible way to build your muscle memory, and if you play on PC, then that is what I recommend that you should do, just so that you don't have to worry about interruptions in training your muscle memory, like dying and having to run back to the fight, for example. And if you play on PC, you can also way more easily back up and restore your save files. So you can do what I do and build an archive of save files, just a save that's before every boss that you fight, just so that you can go back and fight those bosses basically an infinite amount of times. You just have infinite practice on them. I'm not going to mention any names for the specific programs that you use to make yourself invincible or back up your saves or whatever, but now that you know that they exist, if you play on PC, you should be able to find them. Just make sure you're playing offline when you're using cheats to practice on bosses on PC, because you don't want to get banned. Never use cheats online. And unfortunately, that isn't possible for console players either. They don't have access to invincibility. So they're kind of cursed to have to run back to the fight every time they die, and then when they get good at the fight, once they've practiced enough, then they're cursed to have to quit out of the battle before they actually land the winning blow, just so that they can continue to practice. Because if you kill the boss, the boss is dead, you can't keep practicing. So you have to quit and then re-enter the fight, and then fight until it's almost dead again and quit, and there's just a lot of interruptions between doing that and dying and having to run back to the fight. So the rest of this video is just a guide on how console players can build a training character that they can play through the game with alongside their level 1 challenge run character. And the point of like building a save file like this is for you to feel like you're on your level 1 challenge run character while you're playing through it, but you don't need to worry as much about dying, just so you can make practicing more efficient. This exact same character build will always be the most efficient way to practice for a challenge run on console, no matter what type of challenge run you intend to do, even if it's leveling up your weapons or using overpowered summons or doing anything really. You should still make this character because it's always going to be helpful to you. And the goal for this training focus save file is very simple. It's just to reach 60 vigor as quickly as possible and with as little effort as possible. 60 vigor is the level where putting more points into vigor after you get to that level becomes inefficient in a normal playthrough, because at that level you have 1900 health, and leveling up to 99 vigor from 60 only gives you another 200 health. So having level 60 vigor is very close to the level of tankiness that level 99 vigor gives you. It's very close to the peak level of efficiency for having this type of save file. As you play through it, you will eventually get to 99 vigor just casually as you progress, but the point is that you shouldn't feel like you're missing much by not having it right away. Besides leveling up your vigor to 60 and beyond, the point is also to keep all of your other stats at 10 and never level up your weapons. The goal is just to do as little damage as possible while being able to take as much punishment as possible. And that's just so that you can lengthen the amount of time spent in the fight, building muscle memory effectively, and decrease the amount of time spent just running back to the fight between deaths. This character starts the same way that all playthroughs do. Just create the character, die to the grafted scion as quickly as possible just to kind of skip it, then just run straight to meet Melina and acquire Torrent, and from that point you're going to want to head north past that weird gate thing with the troll to collect a couple of very important things. The Wild Strikes Ash of War from a scarab on that pathway up to Margit, and then the Strength Not Crystal Tear from just picking it up from the ground a little bit northeast of the Storm Hill Shack Grace by that troll. You can grab it anytime really. We're not going to use it for a while, but I'm just saying you should grab it now because it's just kind of convenient while you're grabbing Wild Strikes. It's going to help us boost our strength up to be able to wield a weapon that we'll be using later in the guide, so that's why we need it. Then just make your way to the Weeping Peninsula to the south of Limgrave and grab the Morning Star from this ruined cart here. All these items are going to be really important for building the training character, but this weapon, the Morning Star, is also a great weapon for like a real challenge run. And I'm not going to mention like picking up specific golden seeds or other flask upgrades in this particular guide, but I assume you're going to be doing that over the course of, following the guide as well. Definitely something you should be considering while you're running around. But from this point, you should just go grab the Flask of Wondrous Physic, and then you can teleport to Caelid from a little like teleporter that's behind the church where that flask is. And after you teleport, you can grab a grace immediately inside that building that you're teleported to, and then after you grab that grace, you can run down the hill and past a bridge with a dragon on it, and then run past that like Erd Tree sapling and go up the Spirit Spring and continue to run until you get to that grace right in front of Fort Feroth, and then just grab the grace and run down the hill a little bit and use the Morning Star with about 5 blue flasks worth of Wild Strikes and kill that giant sleeping dragon that's just sitting basically just right next to that grace. It's completely safe to do to just stand there and whack its tail. You won't be in any danger at all, and it's just going to take a few minutes to get through it. And after you've succeeded, you will have enough runes to level up your vigor from 10 all the way to 40. And 40 vigor is also the first soft cap for the skill, 60 being the second soft cap, meaning it becomes significantly less efficient to put more points into that skill after you reach those levels. It's still very much worth doing between 40 and 60 because vigor is just the most important skill in the entire game either way, but you can see how in a normal playthrough you might want to stop there just to focus on other skills. And if your goal is to practice the Limgrave bosses like Margit or Godric, this is already enough health to practice them efficiently. Not fully efficiently, but you're already in a good place. But there are a few additional steps I would recommend you take before you start practicing anything, just to catapult that save file like even farther along. You really want your practice character to feel like playing a level 1 character just to make the practice the most efficient it can be, and a level 1 playthrough will almost always be using the Radagon's Soar Seal because it provides an additional 5 vigor and 5 endurance, which are both very good to have. Specifically playing with 15 endurance instead of 10 feels different a lot of the time. You can be a little bit more reckless with your stamina management, and considering that, I would recommend using the Radagon Soar Seal on this training character as well at all times. You can pick it up off the ground at the end of the maze inside of Fort Faroth. Just make sure you don't have any runes on you when you go through that maze to grab it, because you'll probably die to some rats at the end. And with the leftover runes from that dragon kill, you should go grab the Ash of War Endure from Bernal and some armor, just whatever you want, just whatever you think looks cool. Just being at a medium roll is the point more so than having any particular amount of defensive stats. If you need a couple thousand extra runes to buy the armor you want or something, just kill a couple trolls because they drop 1,000 runes each and you have enough health to make that basically a trivial task. Next, you're going to want to head back into Caelid and over to Fort Gale to grab the Star Scourge heirloom out of this chest on the roof. And then you'll also want to head over to Radahn's castle and run behind it, where you can find the Flaming Strike Ash of War by killing a scarab that's kind of sitting around back there by some bats. This Ash of War is really good to have for the next step in the guide, but it's also very good to have because it's like an actual realistic Ash of War you might use in a level 1 challenge run, because a lot of bosses are weak to fire, so you can practice with it and it'll make your practice more realistic as well. And yeah, the most impactful step in building this character, I would say, and the next step in the guide, is beating this putrid Erdtree avatar next to this like Erdtree sapling that you passed on your way to Fort Faroth. It's really important to beat this boss because he drops the Opaline Hardtear, which increases your physical defenses for a while, and that's very useful for a training character because it pushes all that vigor you have even further. It just makes you way tankier. The Erdtree avatar is weak to fire, that's why we're going to use Flaming Strike, and despite beating it being the hardest part in the save file setup, it's actually still pretty easy to do because of your 40 vigor and your armor and your Soar Seal, and the boss itself has a pretty simple move set. Basically in this fight, you're just going to want to dodge forward for every normal move it uses, every staff swing it does. You'll just dodge forward and do a charged heavy attack, and then wait for the next attack where you will again dodge forward and do another charged heavy attack, and you're just going to keep doing that over and over. If he uses his butt slam move that creates a giant rot area of effect in front of him, just dodge to his side. It doesn't matter what side. Dodge to one of his sides and then perform a charged heavy attack when you're there. It's a very simple move to avoid. The area of effect really doesn't matter that much. And if you stagger him after a Rot Slam, just stand directly next to him, basically like right up against him, and face your character towards the direction that he's facing away from. And if you do that, you can perform a light attack and it will engage the critical hit animation where you're invincible for a little while and the rot will disappear off the ground before that animation ends. And then you can do usually just like a jumping heavy attack after you get that critical hit. And that's pretty much all you need to know for the fight, other than sometimes he's going to hold his staff upside down, and when he does that, there's going to be a golden explosion and a bunch of holy projectiles that fire at you. So to avoid that when he does it, you'll just want to dodge backwards twice to avoid the explosion, and then run away and slightly to one side to avoid all of the projectiles. Then wait for a staff attack so you can dodge forward, and then continue with your charged heavy attack trading until you have to dodge that like Rot Slam again or you win. This is not a very difficult fight. You can do this. His moveset is very simple, and that Rot Butt Slam is his most like intimidating move, but once you know how to dodge it, it's very easy to dodge and it can be punished very easily, so don't let this guy intimidate you. You have enough health to be able to make this fight pretty easy. And beating this boss gives you enough runes to level up to 51 vigor, which alongside having the Opaline Hardtear is a huge accomplishment for this save file. That is the majority of the work already behind you.
The next step is to defeat the Leonine Misbegotten at the end of the Castle Morn dungeon
in the Weeping Peninsula, but doing so is trivially easy considering you now have 51 Vigor and access to the Morning Star with Endure. Using that alongside the Radagon Sword Seal and the Opaline Hardtear and some armor basically means you can just use Endure and charge heavy attacks completely mindlessly and you will inevitably succeed. You really don't have to know this fight whatsoever to beat it this way. You can like just Endure, charge heavy attack, Endure, charge heavy attack, and just repeat that until you win. And the Lionine drops the Grafted Blade Greatsword, and not enough runes to level up, but you can spend them on armor or whatever if you avoided that earlier if you didn't have enough runes to finish buying your armor set. The weapon is the real prize of this fight, and the reason will become obvious relatively shortly. The weapon specifically is going to be very useful to get past a bunch of the early game bosses without having to put very much effort into it at all. And that includes the Liurnia bosses as well. The Red Wolf of Radagon and Renala are both very weak to the Grafted Blade Greatsword, so keep that in mind just for like the future. Margit is the next step in building this training character, and like I said earlier, having 51 Vigor and the Opaline Hardtear is already an extremely efficient build if you're intending to literally like genuinely practice Margit. So if that's what you want to do, then go ahead and jump right into it right now. You're already prepared to do that. But if you don't intend to practice him right now and you just want to get past the fight as quickly as possible with as little effort as possible just to continue on the path to 60 Vigor, then this clip here is how you would go about doing that. You can use Endure on your Morning Star, and with your Opaline Hardtear and your armor and your 51 Vigor, you can basically mindlessly Endure with that Morning Star and do charged heavy attacks until you succeed, and it doesn't take that much effort. You will probably have to heal yourself a bit, but this clip actually was my very first attempt using this method, and I didn't dodge a single move intentionally, so it should be very easy for anyone to pull this off, and beating Margit gives you a second talisman slot and enough runes for 52 Vigor. You can just immediately equip the Green Turtle Talisman into that second talisman slot that you unlocked, but I would only recommend practicing with the Green Turtle Talisman if you're planning on doing your actual level 1 run with the Green Turtle Talisman. If you're not going to use it in your real playthrough, then you shouldn't use it while you practice either. Something else that might be sort of useful to you besides the Green Turtle Talisman for your training character might be something like the Ritual Shield Talisman. Really, you want to just maximize your defense. Now the next step is to defeat Godric, and again, you're already in a very good position to practice Godric if that's what you want to do. 52 Vigor is more than enough to get efficient practice against him. So go ahead and get started if that's your goal, but if you just want to get through this fight as quickly as possible with as little effort as possible just for the sake of that 60 Vigor, then this is what you'll want to do. You'll just drink your Wondrous Flask with the Opaline Hardtear and the Strength Knot Crystal Tear in it, and you'll have Radagon Sword Seal and the Star Scourge Heirloom equipped, which will give you enough strength to wield the Grafted Blade Greatsword, and the Ash of War on that weapon is basically just an improved version of Endure. So you can mindlessly tank every attack that Godric does and perform 2 charged heavy attacks per Ash of War activation on Godric and just do that until you win. This is like literally the most brain dead way to beat him. I was able to again achieve this victory on my very first attempt, and that's what you're seeing right now. When I was testing the strategies for this video, I actually did intentionally go into the Margit and the Godric fights with this strategy in mind that you're seeing, with the idea that I wasn't going to use any health potions at all, any flasks, and I was intentionally not going to dodge any moves either. I was just trying to make it as brainless as possible like I described. So even if you don't succeed on your first attempt against these bosses, if you use these strategies, you should be able to succeed almost like guaranteed within the first 5 attempts that you make on them. I would be really surprised if it took longer than that, especially if you decide to use your health potions and you got a whole bunch of upgrades for him and stuff. That is just going to make it extremely easy. And when you do beat him, you can consume his remembrance immediately for an extra 20,000 runes, which alongside the runes he naturally drops when you beat him will allow you to level up to 55 Vigor. And that actually completes this entire training build. You are finished. Considering you should always be using the Radagon Sword Seal for that extra 5 endurance to make it feel like a level 1 character when you're training, and considering that also gives you 5 extra vigor just from equipping that talisman, you now effectively have a permanent 60 vigor, which puts you in a very nice place to get some very good, efficient training against any boss in the game. And when you are actually legitimately training, when you're fighting a boss with the intention of learning its moveset rather than like trying to get through it to get to the boss that you actually do want to fight, I would recommend using an unupgraded club with just like the standard infusion, maybe with Flaming Strike as is Ash of War, just to closely match real level 1 gameplay. Of course, if you have a weapon in mind you want to use for the boss that you're fighting, use that while you practice because you want to just use the same stuff that you might want to use in a real challenge run. But yeah, if you don't know what weapon you might want to use, I always just start with the unupgraded starting club, the wooden club. And make sure you're always using the Radagon Sword Seal because that kind of mimics the 15 endurance that you're always going to have on your level 1 playthrough, as well as getting you up to that 60 vigor until you reach it naturally. And you'll also always want to use that Opaline Hardtear just to continue to increase your survivability as much as you possibly can. Like I said earlier, the goal is to do as little damage as possible, but survive as much damage as possible. As for other talismans on this character, it's really not important to use that many of them, other than maybe the Ritual Shield talisman. So don't feel too bad if you're just like not using your third or fourth talisman slot when you're practicing. It's not a big deal. Same with your second Wondrous Physics slot. If you don't have anything that's defensive, then you might as well just not use anything at all. You could use the Opaline Bubble Tier, for example, but that's only one hit worth of defense, so even that is not as useful as the hard tier. Really, the most important thing you have to remember while you're training is just make sure that you quit out of the game before you actually kill the boss, just so that you can continue to practice it. If you kill it, you won't be able to continue to practice it. After you quit the game in a boss fight, you can then rejoin the game a second later, and you'll be right outside of the boss fog wall, and when you enter it again, the boss is going to have full health again. So that's the point of quitting. But that's pretty much it. If you followed along with this guide, you now have a training character that feels like a level 1 challenge run character that allows you to survive a lot longer than you would be able to survive if you were trying to practice these boss fights on your level 1 character. You're now in the best place you can be as a console player to efficiently build your muscle memory for your challenge run, so that's pretty cool. I do have a whole bunch of moveset guides on my channel for most of the main bosses in the game, so if you need a method to build your knowledge now that you've got a training character that helps you build your muscle memory, go and check that out. And I hope you enjoy the process of mastering the bosses that you're interested in fighting.